I think the challenge that business owners in dentistry or in healthcare more broadly have to care about is, how do I wear those hats or hire people to wear those hats for me in such a way to where I'm not going to be caught unawares and something's going to sink my business just because I'm not naturally good at it. And I think that recognition is what causes people to get into ownership later, if they do.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast for Doctors by Doctors. I'm Dr. Michael Jerkins, not joined by Dr. Ned Palmer. Today, we've been switching off hosting duties recently, but we are joined today by a special guest, a fellow doctor who has kind of seen a business need and figured out a solution for it and been very successful at owning businesses to help patients. And so really excited to hear from another doctor who has ventured out of just clinical work and seen some satisfaction and professional success with that. A lot of topics we'll talk about today, not just what's it like to be a doctor, or what's it like to be a doctor and a business owner, but also what's it like to balance all of these things out, and to get some of his opinions on the current state of medicine and dentistry. So without further ado, we'll welcome our guest. Today on the podcast for Doctors by Doctors, we are joined by the one and only Dr. Alex Sharp. Dr. Sharp is the co-founder and CEO of Shared Practices Group, which is a platform that empowers dentists to maximize their impact through providing life-changing full arch care. Dr. Sharp, welcome to the podcast.
Michael, thank you for having me. It's rare to meet someone that is as passionate about podcasting as I am, not to mention hails from a similar area of the country as I do. So it's just serendipity that our paths crossed, and I'm thankful to be here.
I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. I do think probably this is the only time, maybe in human history, that two doctor podcasters from the state of Arkansas are having a podcast together. What do you think?
It's like on Ghostbusters, they say don't cross the streams. I guess we're doing that, right?
We're crossing the streams. Well, I mean, the bio is pretty short, right? I get these bios that are fairly long and verbose. I think you probably are underselling yourself here in this bio. So I'd really love for you to walk the audience through your journey from dental school through being the CEO of this national group.
Yeah, the journey is pretty interesting because I think, well, first of all, I had a conversation with a team member earlier today, and the question I posed was, what does success in 5 years look like for you within our organization? And he goes, 5 years is a long time. And that made me think, like, okay, well, if you would have asked me 5 years ago what success looked like, the answer would be very different than how things transpired. And I'm thankful for how things transpired, but it's just hard to predict where things end up. But as far as the journey, I graduated dental school and I got a job, and I thought, okay, great, mission accomplished. I graduated, got my license. I've got a job in a busy practice. I'm going to be able to have a lot of opportunity to serve people, make a good living, get my skills up. It's going to be amazing. But what you find coming out of dental school, and I expect it's the same coming out of medical school, is that no two jobs are the same. No two jobs have the exact same amazing qualities or drawbacks. And you almost have to just jump into the deep end of the pool and figure out, where do I fit in this profession that I spent so much time developing the skill set to be able to perform? And so there's all that preparatory work that happens. And then you're on stage and you realize, this isn't exactly what I envisioned. And so then I took that feedback and said, you know what? I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm kind of working in a higher volume office. I'm skimming the surface of the impact that I feel like I'm able to unlock for my patients for a variety of reasons. So then I ended up buying my own practice in Central Arkansas. And that was really cool because then I was able to flex the entrepreneurial muscle and develop systems and have my own philosophy, which was great. Then I got into coaching, I got into podcasting, I got into merging with my business partners to form Shared Practices, which we established to be able to serve dentists at a higher level, to be able to elevate their own understanding of what's possible through optimal practice management so that their unit of time, unit of energy goes further to make their careers that much better. And then COVID happened, which I think for all of us threw some sort of a curveball into whatever finely laid plans. I mean, I remember giving out these binders for all of my team that said 2020 vision. Like that was our thing for 2020. It was like we have this very crystal clear 2020 vision of what we're going to achieve together, and then curveball. So then I realized at that time that dentistry, by and large, has not met the needs of its professionals. And we can go down rabbit holes as to why that is and what parallels there may be to medicine in that regard. But suffice it to say that a lot of dentists felt very beholden to insurance companies by virtue of meeting patient expectations and saying, okay, if the insurance companies say jump, dentists would customarily say how high. And so, long story short, my business partners and I came together and formed Shared Practices Group, which started because we wanted to be insurance independent and we wanted to be able to provide the care that was going unprovided by and large, which in our case is full arch tooth replacement with dental implants. Basically, the next best thing to what God gave you is what we're able to provide, where it's the teeth that don't come in and out. And so we built a business predicated on the provision of those services because number one, it's outside the auspices of dental insurance, which is nice. And number two, it's the type of care that dentists are very, very excited to provide because of how democratized that procedure has become with technology, with patients knowing what that is, knowing to seek it out, having the vocabulary to ask for it. And number three, the demographic tides have turned in such a way to where we have such a huge cohort of people that are either edentulous without teeth or otherwise dentally disenfranchised, where they just don't have access to care. They put themselves last. It's time for them to take care of themselves. It's the mother who paid for braces for all four of her kids and all of a sudden she looks up 20 years later and hasn't taken care of herself, and now she's in a whole heap of trouble with her teeth in a non-restorable situation. And so we feel like as healthcare providers, it's all about impact. And I think somewhere along the way, it's really easy to lose sight of that when you're focused on paying back student loans and showing up to work and doing your thing and focusing on patient care. But if you focus on impact as your North Star, it's hard to go wrong. So that's the lengthier version of the bio.
That is a great bio. And I mean, I think it's interesting because, so let me ask you a couple follow-up questions because we get this question a lot on insurance free, right? Were you able to be insurance free prior to merging with the other practices? Said another way, is it actually feasible for someone to be a one location practice and actually be insurance free?
I think it's feasible, but I don't think it's advisable. And the reason why I say that is that you have to first differentiate yourself. You have to plead the case to the public to say, what am I providing that can't be provided under the guise of insurance? And I know in medicine it's different because there's all these different shades of gray as to we're going to be in network, out of network, are we doing concierge medicine? There's lots of different ways to skin that cat, and in dentistry it's similar. It's just that in dentistry there's a notion of completeness that most patients approach their dental insurance with, when in reality it's more of a coupon, it's more of a discount card, rather than just like full bird insurance. But no, I think it's possible to do it. You have to understand why are you doing it? What are you seeking to get out of it? Because I know I have plenty of clients, plenty of friends that have run insurance participating practices very well. You just have to be smarter about how you do it, about how you manage your volume, how you manage your procedure mix, which procedures do you refer out because it doesn't make fiscal sense to be providing those procedures. So there's ways to coexist with insurance, but if you're just saying for the sake of being out of network or for the sake of being truly fee for service, what reason is it? And in my mind, the correct answer is because I'm providing services that insurance doesn't deem as quote unquote necessary, when in my mind it's very necessary for my patients, and I just don't want to be explaining myself to the insurance companies till kingdom come.
That's something I think all doctors across all specialties who deal with insurance feel at some point or another. Um, how how do you feel the new classes of dental residency and dental school graduates are feeling about practice ownership? What are those conversations like when you're talking to them?
It's really interesting because I try to have a really good pulse on this because it's sort of what I do. And I feel like it's gotten so bifurcated. And when I say bifurcated, I mean you have people that come out of dental school more motivated than ever to pave their own way, hang a shingle, to do it the traditional way, because back in the day, dentistry was highly fragmented, and it was very much a cottage industry where the vast majority of people owned their own shop. There just wasn't a lot of sophistication to the different ways that dentistry could be practiced. Everyone did it more or less the same way. When my granddad was a dentist in Memphis, he owned his own practice, obviously, and he had one employee. He did his own cleanings, he did his own fillings, he did his own extractions, and there just wasn't a lot of complexity because there weren't that many different procedures being offered at the time. And then you fast forward 50 years, it was more common for everyone to still own their own practice, but with a team of hygienists, a team of assistants, some front office personnel. And then now there's gotten to be such a difference in how dentistry is practiced that in order to be able to keep the lights on, you have to be really good at insurance, really good at scheduling, you have to be really good at marketing, you have to nail your phones. You have patients that have a higher dental IQ than they've ever had before, so you have to be more cognizant of how you're presenting care to them and how you're structuring those conversations because they come in either more well informed or just more informed, and it's not always to the benefit or toward the truth. And so I think people come out of dental school knowing by and large how little they know. You may have the 10% that are gunners that want to open their own practice, but 90% of dentists are aware of, hey, I have 5 to 700,000 in student loan debts that I have to pay off. I have very little to show for the very expensive degree that I just had because there's like minimally viable numbers of procedures that I completed in clinic before being unleashed upon the public. I want to go learn how to do dentistry. Like you get the stamp of approval by a dental school, then you have to really learn how to function in private practice. You have to get efficient, you have to get good. And so a lot of dentists want to come out and work and they want to get their stripes, they want to get good, they want to be able to pay back the student loan burden. And it's challenging because they look at large companies that have multiple practices. They don't have the sophistication necessarily to know who's a good one to work for, who should I avoid, should I work for a regional group, should I work for a large single practice with multiple providers. So it's a confusing world out there, and a lot of dentists end up learning the hard way. They take a job, they take their lumps, they take what's good about it. And then I talk to dentists every day that want to join us that have done that. They've been on the merry-go-round of different companies, and they have the different merit badges, I guess, for each one that they worked with. And they learn good things, they learn bad things, but then they eventually get a little clearer on what the optimal path looks like. But for more and more of them, it does not include practice ownership.
So what's interesting is the ADA recently put out some data on practice ownership, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but it was something like 0 to 5 years out of dental training. It's only 8% of those become practice owners in that time period. But as their career continues to advance, many of them at the same rate become practice owners, just echoing what you say. They go to learn their skills, pay off some loans, and eventually they're like, hey, I kind of want to do this whole thing on my own. They just do it a little bit later in their career, whereas maybe a generation ago, it was happening a little bit earlier. So that kind of echoes some of those points you're making.
Part of it's a confidence thing, and part of it's a financial thing because the debt burden, dollars to donuts, is just way more, no matter how you slice it nowadays than it was before. And there's just more moving parts to assuring a successful dental business. There's more things you have to think about, there's more hats that you have to wear. And I think the challenge that business owners in dentistry or in healthcare uh, more broadly have to care about is how do I wear those hats or hire people to wear those hats for me in such a way to where I'm not going to be caught unawares and something's going to sink my business just because I'm not naturally good at it. And I think that recognition is what causes people to get into ownership later, if they do at all. And so, and like with me, I feel like in our business, what we try to do is to try to straddle that line between pure-blooded, 100% owner-operator dentistry, which is what it used to be across the board, the majority was, versus now, how do I own a piece of something bigger? How do I have skin in the game where I have a community around me that helps me to get better, that's its own self-contained learning environment where one person learns a hard lesson and then the other 40 benefit from it. And that's just such a faster pace of iteration than being in four walls by yourself, doing things the old-fashioned way, throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. So it's just a different time that we live in now.
We see the same thing. I mean, I've talked to other, dental practice owners have the same mindset, but in the medical space too, folks that leave the employed setting, they just want to join a larger group, kind of working together, whether it be in multi-specialty practice, surgery centers, those types of things, maybe not hang their own shingle by themselves. Let me ask you this. Do you think that even general dentistry, a residency should be required if so many people are not feeling confident with their clinical skills being done in 4 years?
I think what's interesting about that question is that in some situations, yes, a residency should be required. Some states mandate that. Like New York, for example, you graduate from dental school in New York, it's mandated that you do at least a 1 year residency. And so I think that's one way to engineer that outcome that you want to make sure that everyone's confident and capable across the board. I think rather than saying we need to have a residency, a different way of looking at it would be what's the minimally viable number of fillings, crowns, root canals, dentures, partials, orthodontic treatment? Like, what's the number of procedures that each person needs to have done to be ready to go? Because back in the day, you talk to dental school professors that graduated in the 70s and 80s, they were doing 100 units of everything. They were getting lots and lots and lots of repetitions.
Why is that? Why is there less repetitions now?
More competition for those patients. So, for example, back in the day, if a patient went to the dental school, it was someone that had more time than money. They were okay waiting around for professors to check stuff off. They were okay having a 4 hour diagnostic appointment just for people to get their repetitions. And then now, with the relative ubiquity of the government funded dental insurance plans, that cohort of people that was statistically the most common to seek out dental treatment at the dental school, they have options. They can go to a Medicaid provider, and it may not be the red carpet service that they would love to have, but it's service, and they can get that tooth taken out in 30 minutes. So I think the competition for patients is more fierce, and I think that you just like at UT Memphis where I went, I had to be my own call center, my own scheduler, my own financial coordinator, and the dentist, and my own dental assistant. And then some schools it's set up to where they have a much better outreach program to source those patients so that as a dental student, for the cost of your tuition that you're paying, you show up and then you have the patient on your schedule and you're reading the chart and you're saying, oh, I'm doing a crown on number 3 today. Cool. Versus having to do everything upstream to source the patient. So I think to your point, to make sure that there is a minimally viable number of procedures being done for someone to have graduated, I think we're going to see more of that vertical integration of all the different processes that actually treats the dental student as the customer. Gasp. That's probably how it should have been all along. And that's what carries forth into what we do. Like I was talking to a dentist that wanted to open a practice with us, 30 minutes ago. And I was talking to her and I said, that's our whole philosophy. Like my customer is the dentist. Like I'm here to build the platform to allow the dentist to derive the most benefit out of his or her career, because you can vote with your feet. You can go open your own practice, you can go work for another company, you can do any myriad of things. But I think that's the shift in healthcare education, dental education, is treating the person paying $500,000 as the customer. And if schools can figure that out, then we all benefit.
Yeah, I mean, if you have happier, more, better trained doctors, then you have better delivery of care, which is kind of our model of Panacea is like supporting doctors, making their life better. Then all of our lives are better as patients. Um, it is funny because I remember in med school once they changed the curriculum around. We had this like town hall. It's right down the hallway from where you probably were sitting. And the dean said something to the effect of, well, we could just change and do anything and throw it at you guys and you would learn it. Basically saying like, we don't have to be accountable because you guys are so smart that you're going to learn it anyway, regardless of what we do, which like lets them off the hook, right? Of like being, you know what I mean? And so to your point of, you'll figure it out. Like y'all are smart people. You wouldn't have gotten here otherwise. And so maybe it is a little, people are feeling the heat a little bit more of being accountable to the actual product, right? The I said this like 1,000 times this episodes or this podcast, but every system's perfectly designed for the output it produces. So like if you're producing a bunch of dentists who don't feel well prepared and they're grossly, underwater in debt and don't feel like they can go out on their own and practice, like it's not a great system. we should probably reevaluate that. And to your point, there's some real tangible takeaways on how schools could potentially do that.
Yeah, it just depends on what's the output. What are we seeking to actually achieve here with what we're doing? And I think there's a lot of opportunity for disruption in healthcare because you listen to these podcasts and you listen to these technology first part podcasts and they talk about how healthcare and law and some disciplines like that have a more service oriented component are going to be among the last to be disrupted by this big AI wave that we find ourselves in right now. And I agree with that, but I also think that just means that there's so much opportunity to improve the product. And when I say the product, I mean the delivery of education. And when I mean the product, I also mean the construction of amazing careers for the healthcare practitioners. Because listening to your podcast, I've learned more about the day-to-day and the pressures and the things that can plague healthcare providers in medicine broadly. And it's similar in dentistry where there's so much distraction from the actual provision of the healthcare and from doing the thing that people signed up thinking that they'd be doing all day long. And I think when I say the word disruption, I mean that in the positive sense of the word, is that what can be automated that is the junky background noise that people find themselves having to spend more time on than they really thought they were going to have to when they went into their healthcare training. And I think that's where the opportunity is. So those of us that see this, there's an opportunity to actually change this and say, what could we change about education? What could we change about supporting the practitioners early, mid, late career to actually improve the industry? And I think there's a lot of meat on that bone.
Yes, I agree. I just came back from the health conference in Vegas, which was a new experience for me. I didn't know much about it. And, I'm used to going to these more academic focused conferences with a lot of outcomes and statistics and p-values. That's not what this is. It's a lot of it's a lot of health tech and med tech firms trying to find ways to, they're a business. They're trying to make ways to make money, but I find they're mostly trying to find ways to insert themselves in the transaction between the patient and the insurance provider, or in supporting a business that's trying to then get money that way. And you just mentioned two things of like disrupting and improving education. So that's like a different transaction that none of these companies were really looking at, in my opinion. Or how to support the doctor, which also seems to be maybe adjacent to at best, but also not necessarily where the focus of a lot of this innovation seems to be. And maybe that's actually where most of the gains would be made, instead of just how do we make it more efficient to recoup money from the insurance companies.
Both can be true at the same time if people have the wherewithal to see it that way. But what I mean by that is if we say the outcome that we seek is for the day-to-day existence of the healthcare provider to be better, for their experience in medicine or in dentistry to improve, then almost as a lagging indicator, you'll see the alpha, you'll see the gain, you'll see the efficiency start to creep up. Because if we're not bogged down in minutia, if we're not bogged down in spending 2 hours from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on chart notes every day, and we have a way to automate that and make sure that the quality is there and that we've covered our butts from a documentation standpoint, or if we don't have to follow up on prescriptions and we have a way of having that be automated, and so that as much of our day is spent face to face with the people that we're tasked with serving, then I would argue that a lot of it is just like a fait accompli. It's just going to follow logically that the results improve. And our own little anecdotal case study of that at SPG is what happens if you cut away the stuff that feels transactional or commoditized. Like we predicate our business model on just providing implants, dental surgery, and like this high yield transformational type of procedure that not everyone can do. So if you back to the insurance question earlier, if you don't want to play the insurance game, don't do the services that insurance incentivizes you to do, or that insurance maybe not incentivizes, but seems to prefer implicitly that you do. And you do the stuff that's outside, beyond the pale of what insurance covers, then you're going to be more energized. You're going to feel like you're delivering a higher level of care than when you're on the hamster wheel and you have to see, I don't know, 60 patients a day to make ends meet. I just think if you're optimizing for the experience of the practitioner, I think that's a little controversial nowadays because you want to people want to quantify on a spreadsheet the dollars and cents of the productivity per hour per provider. And yeah, it's good to know those things, but if you make a bigger upstream stylistic decision to say we're going to close ourselves off to this stuff over here and we're only going to focus on the 20% of procedures that give us over 80% of the results, then all of the other dollars and cents tend to take care of themselves.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you've hit on a couple of things. I know you mentioned medicine. I'm not sure. I know I had colleagues that first thought about dental school and then went to med school and then vice versa. If you, knowing what you know now, if you had to switch specialties within healthcare for just a week, just to dabble, what specialty would you want to see or want to experience just for a week, short term?
I got two answers. Within the sphere of medicine, I think dermatology would be really interesting because the more you learn about the skin as an organ, the more you realize that it's this really interesting litmus test for everything else that's going on in the body. Because my wife has Crohn's disease, and so she's got it in remission, and she's been in that world of understanding the connection between things that cause inflammation and then the different manifestations of inflammation. So for some people it's their gut, for some people it's their skin, for some people it's their joints. And inflammation, I think, is just an underappreciated in a lot of circles element that leads to morbidity and low quality of life. So I think dermatologists are positioned to have a really interesting window into the power of really nipping in the bud some of those inflammatory indicators. That's interesting. And then the other one that I'd be interested to learn more about is chiropractic because that's a domain that's I think pretty polarizing for people. And I would be interested just to I'd love to go to chiropractic school just to understand more about that philosophy and understand how the sausage is made there. But no, I think there's a lot in medicine that we overly silo. I fall into this too, but it's easy for the lay public especially to say medicine is siloed because we have the urologist over here, we have the dermatologist over here, the cardiologist over here, when in reality we're all one big integrated body, but things get siloed. So that's something I always find interesting is how siloed it is, maybe because it has to be, but from the patient's perspective, it's like I'm a pinball going between these different providers.
Yeah, I mean, hyper specialization, right? And that's like every field is just hyper specialized. And some of that's a function of the way insurance incentivizes it, and some of it is just the advancements of technologies that allow us to do that. And I think most people would want to go to the most specialized, especially trained provider in that field. Like I think most of us would want our family members to do that, but at scale, it just doesn't. It's hard for that to do that, right? I mean, even think about colonoscopies, especially now that the average or we recommend at 45 for screening colonoscopies. There's not enough GI doctors in this country to do everyone's colonoscopy if everyone followed the guidelines, right? So like even the hyper specialized space, there's not enough specialists to provide care for every single type of diagnosis that falls under their domain. So as a med peds primary care doctor by trade, like the space we live in is trying to handle a lot of prevention and chronic disease management and being judicious with our referrals because we know that pipeline is really tight with just a shortage in specialty care, but it's tough. It's tough out there.
It is tough out there, and that's a helpful bit of context for me to understand that, hey, you got to be judicious with your referrals in medicine too. It's the same in dentistry. And that's the age-old conundrum of how broadly do you go? How much do you broaden your scope in an effort to serve more people? And then you take the give and take of I'm going to be necessarily shallow in my scope, but broad rather than being very deep and narrow. And I think in terms of offering excellent care, it's logical to say we got to stay narrow to actually approach mastery in whatever domain we choose. So yeah, I totally get it. I just think that it's going to be interesting to see how the patient experience continues to evolve with the different specialists in different buildings. I think the ideal for me would be all the dental specialties under one roof, all the medical specialties under one roof, and I'm sure there's stuff like that being built, but just like prioritizing the experience of the provider, I think that's going to be what wins out ultimately in 10, 20, 30 years as things get more automated is who can be the one-stop shop, even if it's not one provider doing everything, but having everything housed to where it's convenient for the patient.
What is the way you see dentists right now most utilizing AI?
I think right now it's the very low-hanging fruit. For example, uh, the software developers are smart enough to know that to be able to get into dental offices, you have to solve the problems that dentists think need to be solved. And what I mean by that is I first saw it with companies that would be an AI assistant for reading radiographs, for saying, hey, check out between tooth number 19 and tooth number 20, there might be a cavity there. And so now it's, you run it through the filter and it circles the different areas of potential concern and lays it out on a platter for the provider to be able to use. And so it's not anything resembling fully integrated. I think there's still a lot of market share yet to be gained. So that was an early one. And then now we're getting more into the automated phones, the automated insurance verification, the automated scheduling online. And dentistry just seems to lag behind a lot of other fields as it pertains to rolling out the latest and greatest because some patients, and this is probably going to be geographic in nature, because what's true for New York City might be different than what's true for Cabot, Arkansas. But a lot of people definitely still like the personal touch, and so it can be off-putting to over-automate stuff from a patient perspective. So there's a balance to strike there, but no, I think there's a lot of opportunity to automate beyond what's being done with phones, with insurance verification, with automating key performance indicators, understanding performance. There's stuff like that happening, but again, it's not necessarily a holistic product where the dentist can overlay this AI onto the practice management software to interpolate trends. I think that's another opportunity.
So it goes back to the technology, hopefully providing efficiencies to eventually lead to happier doctors and better patient care. But like holistically, dentistry in general, what is what is something you would change about dentistry as an industry that would make the biggest impact?
I think it goes back to what I was knocking at the door of with the comment about specialties being under one roof. And what that really gets to is advocating for the patient. I think that's what's largely missing is that dentistry allows itself to be treated as a nice to have, not a must have. Dentistry still falls into the trap of being viewed as elective, even though those of us that are in dentistry see the ripple effects every day of people viewing dentistry as elective. It's optional until it's not, right? And so you have a cavity, start small. It's fixable, it's maintainable. It's just a little scratch basically, and then you deal with it when it's small, and then you keep from having any kind of unintended consequences later on. But then a one-tooth problem becomes a three-tooth problem, and then all of a sudden you're having a conversation, like in one of our practices, where we're faced with removing all the teeth because of the issues being so widespread and beyond repair. And so I think that's the thing is if we start with patient advocacy as the goal, if that's the outcome that we're seeking, where we actually say, here's what we want for our patients. These are the outcomes that we want to have. We want to reduce the rates of all tooth loss to this. We want to, reduce any measure that you want to measure across the country. Then you have to think about what do I need to do to roll out the red carpet to make that feasible for people, either from a cost perspective, from a convenience perspective, or this is sort of the unsung hero, the education perspective. Because we see this across our platform where some people come in having done gobs of research. They have a whole notebook of printouts and they're very well informed as to the nature of their condition and the options for treating it. Other people come in and they purely look to us to hang the moon in terms of educating them, building a case for what they should do, and just spoon feeding it to them throughout the whole process. I don't think there's a right way, but I think if we could shift the paradigm shift would be how do we how do we advocate for the patient by giving them our best recommendation? I think people want to make it a poo-poo platter of a buffet and say you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, but a lot of patients come to you looking for your recommendation rather than an explanation of all the different ways they could go. And I think that comes with experience. I think as dentists, probably as medical doctors too, you get more comfortable and you get more confident to say, look, if you were my mom, with the situation that you have, I would recommend that you do this, and then you zip it. And sometimes that's the best way to advocate for people, is just laying it out there.
You're right. It is interesting because more and more patients come informed. And in my experience, even those who are informed with maybe not the greatest information, at the end of the day, are there to hear your opinion on it and what your recommendations are. Um, I think inherently there's a lot of efficiencies to be gained by AI, of course, but when it comes to your health and things like surgical procedures and things that really come with high risk and high reward potentially, people are going to feel more comfortable with a human. And I say that, and I already hear the critique of you're just saying that because you're biased, and it's probably true. But I think again, put your patient in the setting of one of your family members. Would you want a chatbot telling and performing these procedures on your family member? Not right now. But it's hard for me to expect that in the long term, even. Now, some specialties are more affected, can be more affected than others. I have my own opinions on that in the medical space, but I'd be interested in the dental space. Which dental specialty do you think is most at risk from a employment perspective and viability perspective with the technology changes?
Well, there's two ways to look at this. You could look at the direct impact of technology disrupting that specialty, or you could look at it as what technology is coming into the forefront that's enabling general practitioners to crowd out the necessity of having that specialty. So that's the thing about dentistry, is that as a general dentist, the world is your oyster, and you can do lots of different things, and you can carve out an unofficial subspecialty within the broader auspices of general dentistry. So door number one is what specialty is just going to get disrupted. And I think endodontics, like doing root canals, is one that is going to continue to shrink because dental implants. Because used to, when you had a tooth that was on its last leg, the only hope to preserve it, and that's something I learned the hard way. Don't ever say you're saving a tooth. Say you're preserving a tooth. Word to the wise. So in order to preserve the tooth, to have a chance at it, you got to take the nerve out. You got to remove the blood supply and innervation of it, and then you build the tooth back up as strong as you can, knowing that it's living on borrowed time because the tooth gets brittle with the lack of nerve and blood supply. So that's a specialty that I think is going to continue to shrink. Door number two is the technology making available the ability to provide certain procedures to the general dental population, which by and large will compete away some of the fluffy margins of some of those specialty procedures. Orthodontics, you see a lot of general dentists doing Invisalign and even playing with brackets and wires. So taking the easy stuff and only sending the hard stuff to the specialists is happening. Oral surgeons, more general dentists are doing wisdom teeth and implants and stuff that used to only fall under the auspices of oral surgeons. So I think that's the real shift that I see, is that with three-dimensional imaging technology, with the improvements of materials, with the approachability of providing some of these procedures, you're seeing the general dentists that want to be more armed with a beefier utility belt and a bag of tricks that allows them to provide more procedures. And I think that the danger there, though, is you're going to fall into the whole jack of all trades, master of none kind of conundrum, where you feel like you have to do everything for everybody. And in my experience, that can lead to burnout rather than saying, you know what, I'm just going to narrow the aperture and lay down the gauntlet and say, I'm going to do this stuff for this population of people because that doesn't feel like work to me. And sometimes the jack of all trades, master of none thing is a function of student loan debt, I got to pay off my practice loan, financial pressures, more so than the desire to do all those things.
That's the other part too, is if one, the general dentist is going to have the ability to crowd out some of the specialty procedures because they can do that now with advanced technologies, et cetera, combined with the fact that there's federal student loan caps now that are going to be well below what anyone's going to blow through for a dental residency. There's now financial disincentive to pursue advanced training because you're going to have private student loans filling that gap from the private markets without income-driven repayment plans, probably higher interest rates. So it'll be very interesting. We're not going to feel this now. It's going to be 5, 10 years from now, as long as that policy stays, where you might have kind of a double whammy on the dental specialties, both from the demand and the supply side.
Yeah, I didn't think about the double whammy because obviously it's years of deferred compensation where you're getting paid as a resident, which isn't as much as you make in private practice, obviously, and you're choosing to narrow your niche. So you have to have a lot of confidence that you're going to be able to go out and execute your plan to be able to repay the extra loans. You have to have it's kind of like in baseball, you have wins above replacement. It's kind of like the income over the GP income that you have to think about as a specialist. Like if you take the null hypothesis of making general dentist money, you have to make sure that as a specialist, you're at least going to make that plus in order to justify the extra time allocation and the narrowing of your scope. So it's an interesting problem because some people end up actually renouncing their specialty license to go back into general dentistry or switching specialties because they find out that the water on that end of the pool isn't as good as what they thought it would be.
Yeah. Well, let me pivot to some true and false statements. So essentially, Dr. Sharp, I say a statement. You tell me if it's true or if it's false and why. I like to say these are rapid fire, but generally they're not as rapid as I think they're going to be. But let's start with the first one. True or false, dentists should all own their own practice to truly be independent.
False, because it's not right for everyone. I think it's a great pursuit. I think it's a phenomenal way to earn a living and spend a career. But I've seen firsthand that not every personality type is cut out for it. Because if you really just want to be an academic or a clinician or just focused on the work, then so much of what's required to run a business is not the work that you thought you were signing up for. It's not patient care. Because if you're truly wired for patient care, yes, you can do well enough to keep the lights on, but the margin for error is getting slimmer and slimmer between running a thriving business and running a struggling business that creates more stress than it does provide benefits. So I think it's still going to be a viable path for people for 10, 20, 30 years because we're not nearly as consolidated as pharmacy or medicine or veterinarian even is becoming. But it's not as easy as it used to be, and it requires a different skill set, and it requires recognition of the need to develop that skill set because it's not just a matter of rolling the ball out and putting 5 players on the court and winning. Like you have to actually have a plan on that side of the ball.
Makes sense. I like all the sports metaphors, by the way.
It's what you get. Yeah, sorry.
I love it. I love it. All right. Next statement, true or false? DSOs make dental care better for patients.
It's like debate in high school. I can make a case on either side, so I'll steel man both sides independently. So I would say true in that there are pre-prescribed ways of operating in most DSOs that result in quality control that's just not there on the downside in some garden variety private practice. So with a garden variety private practice that's individually owned, might be better, might be worse. There's no way of knowing. There's no central governing body in that apparatus generally that maintains quality control. So that's one bull case for the clinical quality in DSOs. Like in the best DSOs, the clinical quality is going to be better because you have central people auditing X-rays, looking through and doing and pulling charts to make sure everything's going well, supporting doctors if they have a complication. So best case is rising tide lifts all ships. Worst case, you get people that run companies that employ dentists that aren't dentists themselves, where it's not a company like SPG, where it's dentist founded, dentist led, that sometimes get their wires crossed as far as what they're incentivized to care about. And you can see, bad actors coming to bear in those types of situations, which that can happen in a single practice or a group practice. But I'm optimistic by nature, and I would like to think that in multi-site companies where they are founded by healthcare providers and run by healthcare providers, that the overall quality is going to be better. And I feel like in our company that's the case. And is it the case across the board? No, I'm sure it's not. But I feel like it can be if people align their incentives properly.
Love it. It's a very nuanced, not rapid fire round take. I probably would have answered it the same way.
That's on me.
uh,
That's on me.
no, I love it. I love it. All right, next, true or false? Dental school is getting better at preparing you for practice ownership.
Oh, that's an easy false. I think it's preparing people for what they think they need to be prepared for, like the people that are creating the curriculum. And I think there's some newer dental schools that are changing this, that are taking a more integrated view of coming up with the curriculum. But I think these dental schools that are stuck in the 1950s, it's just you're teaching old approaches just because those old approaches have always been taught without re-examining for first principles. What does the modern day dental graduate need to know? So I don't think people are coming out well prepared, better prepared clinically or in terms of practice management, unfortunately.
Wow. And so your expectation is these new ones will solve for some of that?
I think there are glimmers of hope from ones that I've talked to. So people that I've talked to that have helped to launch these new dental schools, or these dental schools that have employed longtime private practitioners in a decision-making capacity, gives me cause for hope. I'll say the jury's still out, but again, I'm optimistic.
That's great. I'll be hopeful as well. Last true or false statement. Patients are less loyal to their dentist than they used to be.
I would say true, because think about how people get information now. Back in the day, it was the phone book. Back in the day, it was exchanging opinions in Sunday school. Like now, it's the internet. So there's the ubiquity of choice. Like people have so many choices now compared to what they used to, and uh, relationships can be more transactional than they ever used to be. Someone tells you something they don't like, then they're going to next go somewhere else. I think that varies by geography and it varies by demographic, but I think that's dentistry has become more commoditized and transactional by and large, and I think there's ways to improve that. But as an institution, that's the way it's going.
Hmm. Well, let me end on this question. We always ask the same question to all of our guests. What is one thing that you have recently changed your mind about? It could be about dentistry or really anything.
I'd say one thing that I've changed my mind about recently is be careful trusting the experts. And that doesn't necessarily mean in healthcare. That just means in people that lead with their expertise or they lead with their cachet in a certain industry. Always measure twice, cut once. And I think it's easy to become enamored of someone who says that they're the bee's knees, whatever it is. Whether, like for us as healthcare providers, a lot of us don't have the same training as a CFO or a CPA or a chief marketing officer or someone who's well versed in human resources or law. And it's easy to conflate aptitude with their resume when there's so much more to the puzzle. And even as a Luddite in a given domain or as a neophyte in some subspecialty, you can still find ways to ask questions to gauge, does someone know what they're talking about? And more importantly, do they have your best interest in mind? So I think that's something that as we're navigating through the different twists and turns of how healthcare evolves, always bear in mind, measure twice, cut once as it pertains to working with people, hiring people, making sure incentives are aligned, that someone's a good cultural fit. Always go with your gut.
That's a great point. And also, as doctors, right, we're starved for time. And so sometimes we have less time to measure twice. And so we can kind of move fast and be over trusting. Because also, right, it's part of it is, and maybe I'm getting us all up on a high horse, but generally when doctors say something, we mean it. And we're not blowing smoke. We're not generally trained salespeople. We're trained clinicians, educators. And so we're not as well versed when someone comes to you in a business setting and says a thing, you're like, oh yeah, that's what they said it, so that must be true. You're like, that's not how that normally works. I don't know if that plays a part and it resonates with you at all, but I think it does, at least in my experience.
Well, it's really easy to take things at face value because it takes less mental energy to accept it at face value than it does to actually do your due diligence. Trusting is easy. The verifying part of trust and verify is hard. And sometimes people learn through pain and they learn through getting burned. And so I think it's a good lesson. It's a good way to learn. It's effective. It's not fun, but it's effective. And so the more that you can learn from those of us that have been there, done that, and gotten the T-shirt, the easier it is to save yourself the travails that a lot of us have gone through.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, Dr. Sharp, thank you for joining us today. Tell the audience where they can find out more from you, your podcast, and shared practices.
Thanks for the invitation there, Michael. So we have a family of podcasts. The Shared Practices podcast is the original practice management podcast for dentists. We have the Full Arch podcast, which is for dentists that love the clinical side, that love a full arch reconstructive dentistry. I host the SPG podcast, which is sort of analogous to what you're doing, where I'm talking about the industry, I'm talking about the goings-on of us internally, like the bird's eye view of us building a national company as we're doing it. Those are our three podcasts, and then I'm on LinkedIn, Alex Sharp, and then if you want to shoot me an email, alex@sharedpractices.com.
Amazing. Dr. Sharp, thank you for spending time with us today, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for joining us this episode, and you can catch the podcast for Doctors by Doctors on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and all the other major podcasting platforms. If you enjoyed this episode or learned anything here today, please take a moment to give us a rating and subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode release. To submit topic suggestions or guest suggestions or questions, you can reach us at podcast@panaceafinancial.com. As always, thanks for listening, and the next time you see a doctor, maybe you should prescribe them this podcast. See you next time.